Years pass swiftly in Bursey, for the nymphs have no need to regard time in any way. Even centuries make no change in the dainty creatures. Ever and ever they remain the same, immortal and unchanging. Claus, however, being mortal, grew to manhood day by day. Nestle was disturbed presently to find him too big to lie in her lap, and he had a desire for other food than milk. "You are not of them," returned the woodsman. "The nymph who cared for you as a mother seems now like a sister to you. By and by, when you grow old and gray, she will seem like a daughter." Hello, my friends. Welcome back to my channel. ASMR Sleep Z. My name is Mel, in case you didn't already know. And as you can see, we are heading into holiday content. Today we are continuing to read The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus by L. Frank Baum, who is the same writer as The Wizard of Oz. We did the first 3 prior, so today we start on 10. Which is chapter 4th, which I find hilarious. Everything is written that way. Chapter 1st, chapter 2nd, chapter 3rd, chapter 4th. Claus. Another day found Nestle's bower the most popular place in the forest. The nymphs clustered around her, and the child that lay asleep in her lap, with expressions of curiosity and delight. Nor were they wanting in praises for the great act's kindness in allowing Nestle to keep the babe and to care for it. Even the queen came to peer into the innocent childish face and to hold a helpless, chubby fist in her own fair hand. "What shall we call him, Nestle?" she asked, smiling. "He must have a name, you know." "Let him be called Claus," answered Nestle, "for that means a little one." "Rather let him be called Claus," returned the queen, "for that will mean Nestle's little one." The nymphs clapped their hands in delight, and Claus became the infant's name, although Nestle loved best to call him Claus, and in after days many of her sisters followed her example. Then we have a little footnote here saying, "Some people have spelled this name Niklaus and others Nicholas, which is the reason that Santa Claus is still known in some lands as Saint Nicholas. But of course, Nicholas is his right name, and Claus the nickname given him by his adopted mother, the fair nymph Nestle. Nestle gathered the softest moss in all the forest for Claus to lie upon, and she made his bed in her own bower. Of food the infant had no lack. The nymphs searched the forest for belludders, which grow upon the goat tree, and when opened are found to be filled with sweet milk. And the soft-eyed does willingly gave a share of their milk to support the little stranger, while Shikra, the lioness, often crept stealthily into Nestle's bower, and purred softly as she lay beside the babe and fed it. So the little one flourished and grew big and sturdy day by day, while Nestle taught him to speak and to walk and to play. His thoughts and words were sweet and gentle, for the nymphs knew no evil, and their hearts were pure and loving. He became the pet of the forest, for Act's decree had forbidden beast or reptile to molest him, and he walked fearlessly wherever his will guided him. Presently the news reached the other immortals that the nymphs of Bursey had adopted a human infant, and that the act had been sanctioned by the great hag. Therefore many of them came to visit the little stranger, looking upon him with much interest. First the Rills, who were first cousins to the wood nymphs, although so differently formed, for the Rills are required to watch over the flowers and plants as the nymphs watch over the forest trees. search the wide world for the food required by the roots of the flowering plants, while the brilliant colors possessed by the full-blown flowers are due to the dyes placed in the soil by the rills, which are drawn through the little veins in the roots and the body of the plants as they reach maturity. The rills are a busy people, for their flowers bloom and fade continually, but they are merry and light-hearted, and are very popular with the other immortals. Next came the Knooks, whose duty it is to watch over the beasts of the world, both gentle and wild. The Knooks have a hard time of it, since many of the beasts are ungovernable and rebel against restraint. But they know how to manage them after all, and you will find that certain laws of the Knooks are obeyed by even the most ferocious animals. Their anxieties make the Knooks look old and worn and crooked, and their natures are a bit rough from associating with wild creatures continually. Yet they are most useful to humanity, and to the world in general, as their laws are the only laws the forest beasts recognize except those of the master woodsman. Then there were the fairies, the guardians of mankind, who were much interested in the adoption of Claus, because their own laws forbade them to become familiar with their human charges. There are instances on record where the fairies have shown themselves to human beings, and have even conversed with them. But they are supposed to guard the lives of mankind unseen and unknown, and if they favor some people more than others, it is because these have won such distinction fairly, as the fairies are very just and impartial. But the idea of adopting a child of men had never occurred to them, because it was in every way opposed to their laws. So their curiosity was intense to behold the little stranger adopted by Nestle and her sister nymphs. Claus looked upon the immortals, who thronged around him with fearless eyes and smiling lips. He rode laughingly upon the shoulders of the merry rills. He mischievously pulled the grey beards of the low-browed Knooks. He rested his curly head confidently upon the dainty bosom of the Fairy Queen herself. And the rills loved the sound of his laughter, the Knooks loved his courage, the fairies loved his innocence. The boy made friends of them all, and learned to know their laws intimately. No forest flower was trampled beneath his feet, lest the friendly rills should be grieved. He never interfered with the beasts of the forest, lest his friends the Knooks should become angry. The fairies he loved dearly, but, knowing nothing of mankind, he could not understand that he was the only one of his race admitted to friendly intercourse with them. Indeed, Claus came to consider that he alone, of all the forest people, had no like nor fellow. To him, the forest was the world. He had no idea that millions of toiling, striving human creatures existed, and he was happy and content. Chapter 5th. The Master Woodsman. Years pass swiftly in Bursey, for the nymphs have no need to regard time in any way. Even centuries make no change in the dainty creatures. Ever and ever they remain the same, immortal and unchanging. Claus, however, being mortal, grew to manhood day by day. Nestle was disturbed presently to find him too big to lie in her lap, and he had a desire for other food than milk. His stout legs carried him far into Bursey's heart, where he gathered supplies of nuts and berries, as well as several sweet and wholesome roots, which suited his stomach better than the bell udders. He sought Nestle's bower less frequently, till finally it became his custom to return thither only to sleep. The nymph, who had come to love him dearly, was puzzled to comprehend changed nature of her charge and unconsciously altered her own mode of life to conform to his whims. She followed him readily through the forest paths, as did many of her sister nymphs, explaining as they walked all the mysteries of the gigantic wood and the habits and nature of the living things which dwelt beneath its shade. The language of the beasts became clear to little Claus, but he never could understand their sulky and morose tempers. Only the squirrels, the mice, and the rabbits seemed to possess cheerful and merry natures. Yet would the boy laugh when the panther growled and stroked the bear's glossy coat, while the creature snarled and bared its teeth menacingly. The growls and snarls were not for Claus, he well knew, so what did they matter? He could sing the songs of the bees, recite the poetry of the wood flowers, and relate the history of every blinking owl in Bursey. He helped the rills to feed their plants and the nooks to keep order among the animals. The little immortals regarded him as a privileged person, being especially protected by Queen Zerline and her nymphs, and favored by the great Ak himself. One day the master woodsman came back to the forest of Bursey. He had visited in turn all his forests throughout the world, and they were many and broad. Not until he entered the glade where the queen and her nymphs were assembled to greet him did Ak remember the child he had permitted Nestle to adopt. Then he found sitting familiarly in the circle of lovely immortals a broad-shouldered, stalwart youth, who, when erect, stood fully as high as the shoulder of the master himself. Ak paused, silent and frowning, to bend his piercing gaze upon Claus. The clear eyes met his own steadfastly, and the woodsman gave a sigh of relief as he marked their placid depths and read the youth's brave and innocent heart. Nevertheless, as Ak sat beside the fair queen, and the golden chalice, filled with rare nectar, passed from lip to lip, the master woodsman was strangely silent and reserved, and stroked his beard many times with a thoughtful motion. With morning he called Claus aside in kindly fashion, saying, "Bid good-bye for a time to Nestle and her sisters, for you shall accompany me on my journey through the world." The venture pleased Claus, who knew well the honor of being companion of the master woodsman of the world. But Nestle wept for the first time in her life, and clung to the boy's neck, as if she could not bear to let him go. The nymph who had mothered this sturdy youth was still as dainty, as charming and beautiful as when she had dared to face Ak with the babe clasped to her breast. Nor was her love less great. Ak beheld the two clinging together, seemingly as brother and sister to one another, and again he wore this thoughtful look. This is a little bit blurry. Chapter 6. Claus discovers humanity. Taking Claus to a small clearing in the forest, the master said, "Place your hand upon my girdle and hold fast while we journey through the air. For now shall we encircle the world and look upon many of the haunts of those men from whom you are descended." These words caused Claus to marvel, for until now he had thought himself the only one of his kind upon the earth. Yet in silence he grasped firmly the girdle of the great Ak, his astonishment forbidding speech. Then the vast forest of Bursey seemed to fall away from their feet, and the youth found himself passing swiftly through the air at a great height. Ere long there were spires beneath them, while buildings of many shapes and colors met their downward view. It was a city of men, and Ak, pausing to descend, led Claus to its enclosure. Said the master, "So long as you hold fast to my girdle, you will remain unseen by all mankind, though seeing clearly yourself. To release your grasp will be to separate yourself forever from me and your home in Bursey. One of the first laws of the forest is obedience, and Claus had no thought of disobeying the master's wish. He clung fast to the girdle and remained invisible. Thereafter, with each moment passed in the city, the youth's wonder grew. He, who had supposed himself created differently from all others, now found the earth swarming with creatures of his own kind. Indeed, said Ak, the immortals are few, but the mortals are many. Claus looked earnestly upon his fellows. There were sad faces, gay and reckless faces, pleasant faces, anxious faces, and kindly faces, all mingled in puzzling disorder. Some worked at tedious tasks, some strutted in impudent conceit, some were thoughtful and grave, while others seemed happy and content. Men of many natures were there, as everywhere, and Claus found much to please him and much to make him sad. But especially he noted the children, first curiously, then eagerly, then lovingly. Ragged little ones rolled in the dust of the streets, playing with scraps and pebbles. Other children, gaily dressed, were propped upon cushions and fed with sugar plums. Yet the children of the rich were not happier than those playing with the dust and pebbles, it seemed to Claus. Childhood is the time of man's greatest content, said Ak, following the youth's thoughts. 'Tis during these years of innocent pleasure that the little ones are most free from care. Tell me, said Claus, why do not all these babies fare alike? Because they are born in both cottage and palace, returned the master. The difference in the wealth of the parents determines the lot of the child. Some are carefully tended and clothed in silks and dainty linen. Others are neglected and covered with rags. Yet all seem equally fair and sweet, said Claus thoughtfully. Well, they are babes, yes, agreed Ak. Their joy is in being alive, and they do not stop to think. In after years, the doom of mankind overtakes them, and they find they must struggle and worry, work and fret, to gain the wealth that is so dear to the hearts of men. Such things are unknown in the forest where you were reared. Claus was silent a moment, then he asked, why was I reared in the forest among those who are not of my race? Then Ak, in a gentle voice, told him the story of his babyhood, how he had been abandoned at the forest's edge, and left a prey to wild beasts, and how the loving nymph Nestle had rescued him and brought him to manhood under the protection of the immortals. Yet I am not of them, said Claus musingly. You are not of them, returned the woodsman. The nymph who cared for you as a mother seems now like a sister to you. By and by, when you grow old and gray, she will seem like a daughter. Yet another brief span, and you will be but a memory while she remains Nestle. Then why, if man must perish, is he born? Demanded the boy. Everything perishes except the world itself and its keepers, answered Ak. But while life lasts, everything on earth has its use. The wise seek ways to be helpful to the world, for the helpful ones are sure to live again. Much of this Claus failed to understand fully, but a longing seized him to become helpful to his fellows, and he remained grave and thoughtful while they resumed their journey. They visited many dwellings of men in many parts of the world, watching farmers toil in the fields, warriors dash into cruel fray, and merchants exchange their goods for bits of white and yellow metal. And everywhere the eyes of Claus sought out the children in love and pity, for the thought of his own helpless babyhood was strong within him, and he yearned to give help to the innocent little ones of his race, even as he had been succored by the kindly nymph. Day by day, the master woodsman and his pupil traversed the earth, Ak speaking but seldom to the youth, clung steadfastly to his girdle, but guiding him into all places where he might become familiar with the lives of human beings. And at last they returned to the grand old forest of Bursey, where the master set Claus down within the circle of the nymphs, among whom the pretty Nestle anxiously awaited him. The brow of the great hag was now calm and peaceful, but the brow of Claus had become lined with deep thought. Nestle sighed at the change in her foster son, who until now had ever been joyous and smiling, and the thought came to her that never again would the life of the boy be the same as before this eventful journey with the master. Chapter 7th. Claus leaves the forest. When good Queen Zerline had touched the golden chalice with her fair lips, and it had passed around the circle in honor of the traveler's return, the master woodsman of the world, who had not yet spoken, turned his gaze frankly upon Claus and said, "Well?" The boy understood and rose slowly to his feet beside Nestle. Once only his eyes passed around the familiar circle of nymphs, every one of whom he remembered as a loving comrade, but tears came unbidden to dim his sight, so he gazed thereafter steadfastly at the master. "I have been ignorant," said he, simply, "until the great hag in his kindness taught me who and what I am. You who live so sweetly in your forest bowers, ever fair and youthful and innocent, are no fit comrades for a son of humanity. For I have looked upon man, finding him doomed to live for a brief space upon earth, to toil for the things he needs, to fade into old age, and then to pass away as the leaves in autumn. Yet every man has his mission, which is to leave the world better in some way than he found it. I am of the race of men, and man's lot is my lot. For your tender care of the poor forsaken babe you adopted, as well as for your loving comradeship during my boyhood, my heart will ever overflow with gratitude. My foster mother," here he stopped and kissed Nestle's white forehead, "I shall love and cherish while life lasts, but I must leave you to take my part in the endless struggle to which humanity is doomed, and to live my life in my own way." "What will you do?" asked the Queen gravely. "I must devote myself to the care of the children of mankind, and try to make them happy," he answered. "Since your own tender care of a babe brought to me happiness and strength, it is just and right that I devote my life to the pleasure of other babes. Thus will the memory of the loving nymph Nestle be planted within the hearts of thousands of my race for many years to come, and her kindly act be recounted in song and in story while the world shall last." "Have I spoken well, O master?" "You have spoken well," returned Hag, and rising to his feet he continued, "Yet one thing must not be forgotten. Having been adopted as the child of the forest and the playfellow of the nymphs, you have gained a distinction which forever separates you from your kind. Therefore, when you go forth into the world of men, you shall retain the protection of the forest, and the powers you now enjoy will remain with you to assist you in your labors. In any need, you may call upon the nymphs, the rills, the nooks, and the fairies, and they will serve you gladly. I, the master woodsman of the world, have said it, and my word is the law." Claus looked upon Hag with grateful eyes. "This will make me mighty among men," he replied. "Protected by these kind friends, I may be able to make thousands of little children happy. I will try very hard to do my duty, and I know the forest people will give me their sympathy and help." "We will," said the Fairy Queen earnestly. "We will," cried the merry rills, laughing. "We will," shouted the crooked nooks, scowling. "We will," exclaimed the sweet nymphs proudly. But Nestle said nothing. She only folded Claus in her arms and kissed him tenderly. "The world is big," continued the boy, turning again to his loyal friends, "but men are everywhere. I shall begin my work near my friends, so that if I meet with misfortune, I can come to the forest for counsel or help." With that he gave them all a loving look and turned away. There was no need to say goodbye. By for him the sweet wild life of the forest was over. He went forth bravely to meet his doom, the doom of the race of man, the necessity to worry and work. But Ak, who knew the boy's heart, was merciful and guided his steps. Coming through Bursey to its eastern edge, Claus reached the laughing valley of Ho. That's funny. On each side were rolling green hills, and a brook wandered midway between them to wind afar off beyond the valley. At his back was the grim forest, at the far end of the valley a broad plain. The eyes of the young man, which had until now reflected his grave thoughts, became brighter as he stood silent, looking out upon the laughing valley. Then on a sudden his eyes twinkled as stars do on a still night, and grew merry and wide. For at his feet the cowslips and daisies smiled on him in friendly regard. The breeze whistled gaily as it passed by, and fluttered the locks on his forehead. The brook laughed joyously as it leaped over the pebbles and swept around the green curves of its banks. The bees sang sweet songs as they flew from dandelion to daffodil. The beetles chirruped happily in the long grass, and the sunbeams glinted pleasantly over all the scene. "Here," cried Claus, stretching out his arms as if to embrace the valley, "will I make my home." That was many, many years ago. It has been his home ever since. It is his home now. Well, that is the end of the first section. Now we are heading into manhood, but I'm going to save that for the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon.